Welcome. My name is Greg Licciardi. I am Vice President of Partnerships for Worth Media Group, and I've been teaching marketing now almost 10 years at Fordham. And I'm coming out with the first book this spring titled Achieving the Holy Grail of Marketing, which is a framework that I teach in my class. And about a year ago, I came up with the concept for my book. You see, coming out of the pandemic, I became a fast food junkie. I got hooked on Wendy's. And I would go in and then start ordering online and picking up. And I realized that I started getting messaging with offers and incentives coming into my social feed. And I said, Wendy's is achieving the holy grail of marketing. They're reaching the right person at the right time with the right message in the right environment, delivering the right outcome. And the other two things that I came across that went into my book is that marketing is changing at breakneck speed right now with AI and software coming in, and that brands need a guiding framework to help them be successful. A lot of what William shared, right? That cesspool of AI that was coming in and really making it challenging. The second thing that I noticed was that as brands became dazzled by AI, marketing was becoming quickly commoditized. And what was being lost was that emotional connection they were having with brands and promoting their brand ethos. And there's no sector that does this better and knows the value of emotional connection than luxury. And this conversation relates directly to athletes and other organizations that are here in this room. So to help enlighten us on this topic today, we are so lucky to have with us Pauline Brown. And Pauline is former CEO of LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, and the largest, most reputable luxury brand in the world. Pauline headed it up for the US. Pauline also is an adjunct professor at Columbia, where she teaches marketing, and has done several great initiatives. But she had a book that published, it was a groundbreaking book on aesthetic intelligence, and she has her own consultancy on aesthetic, titled Aesthetic Intelligence Group, where she does strategic marketing for luxury brands. And she also, this is a lot, she has Aesthetic Equities, which is an investment firm where she partners with leaders of luxury brands. So we're so lucky to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today. It would be great for you to just start off maybe sharing some highlights of your career leading up to what you're doing today.
Well, like the athletes, you can hear me okay, yeah? Like the athletes that we heard earlier, I too had quite a few inflection points, and they only, in retrospect, I can make a very elegant story out of it, but in prospective, it was a lot of different, very discrete and seemingly unrelated chapters. I always had an artistic bent growing up, but I also am a practical person, and the practical side of me ended up taking me to the Wharton Business School. And I was of the mind that in order to succeed, and particularly with the pressure as a first generation American, offspring of Jewish refugees from Europe in the 1930s, like I had to park who I am, right? And I had to do that which made sense. So I went down a path, and my first job, although it's not really where I grew up professionally, but my first job after business school was in consulting. And I often call that stage my MBA Part 2. And I quickly realized when I was there that there was something very disconnected about having my product be a deck or a set of analysis, that I wanted something that felt more tangible, more lasting. I wanted to affiliate with a company that was bigger than my own hours or service proposition. And so with that, I looked around and I made a big jump, which was in defiance of what everyone else I knew who was leaving Bain to go to VC or technology. It was this Internet 1.0. I went into the beauty industry, and I joined Estee Lauder just as it had gone public. It was still quite a small and largely family-controlled company. And I spent about 10 years there. And I really feel like everything I know today about what makes a brand desirable and aspirational and what gives it permission to charge a premium is really what I learned in that decade. Years later, found myself at LVMH, which is a much broader portfolio. It has a beauty component, but also a jewelry and watches and wine and spirits and fashion and accessories. And in between, I was a private equity investor. So the reason I share this with you is if there was only one thread that was a bit of a continuum from those very early pre-professional years where I had gravitated to art, it was sort of a love and a value toward or an appreciation of that which is aesthetic. And it's really what enables the luxury industry to continue to thrive. If you don't have that, you have nothing. You have no reason to be.
Amazing. And aesthetic plays in so much with luxury. And tying in with the theme of our discussion today, winning in luxury and branding, it'd be great for you to share your definition of what luxury is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me start by saying it's not what we often first think of it. Luxury is not defined because it's expensive. It's not defined because it might have status or be be desirable for its status. These are all, if anything, benefits of being a good luxury brand, but they don't create the luxury brand. Real luxury, and there's an awful lot of brands out there that call themselves that or that try to be and play in that space that are just do not qualify. And most of them will not be around maybe for one generation, certainly not two or three. Real luxury, unlike kind of the marketing dynamic you described earlier, which is fast changing and quite different today than even a few decades ago, is very much the same as what it was 300, 500 years ago. So three criteria, very simple. Hard to make, hard to find, last forever, right? And I say that because, and we could, when I first entered academia, post-corporate career, I taught a course at Harvard Business School. And I always said, Harvard University, for all its faults, is really America's best luxury brand. Hard to make, because I don't let anyone in just because they want to go there. And by the way, it took a few hundred years, over 200, to create the Harvard goodwill reputation that we know. Last forever because they can do so many bad things, and we can see, the graft that goes on. We can, see some of the political protests that people find offensive, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, and still they will have multiples more applicants than they could fill, right? So it's here to stay, whether we like it or not. And so there's that sort of sense of permanence, and and there's a craftsmanship, because in terms of the actual value proposition, not just anyone can join the faculty there, not just anyone can get a paper published, or not just anyone can get an A+, right? There's a craftsmanship. And I could say the same thing about a Ferrari car, right? It's hard to make, which is why there's only a few hundred. They don't make big volume. It's hard to find. If you have the money, and even if you are willing to pay 10x what their retail price is, you still go on a waiting list, right?
Yeah.
And if you have it, it's one of the few automotive products or brands that increases in value over time, doesn't decrease. I mean, most of them, the minute you drive off the lot, it's half the price in the valuation. So, and athletes are luxury brands too, because none of you who are here today got there easily, no matter how gifted you were as a child. Think of all the gifted people we know who rotted away. It's hard work. It took a lot of discipline, took a lot of time, took a lot of investment. And so there's that's the craft. There's very few. For every person who wants to be, including our keynote a moment ago, wants to be a professional baseball player, probably 1 out of 1,000 will even stand a chance. Maybe it's 1 out of 100,000. And the best of the best are legends, right? Michael Jordan hasn't been actively playing basketball for years, but his legacy will live on for
Sure
100
will.
years, like other great baseball players of generations past. So so I think it's important to see yourself as a luxury brand, but also to protect yourself as an LVMH brand would protect itself from over commercialization, cheapening your associations, not staying disciplined as you have to for the long term.
Wow, that's a really good definition and examples. I knew I should have gone to Harvard. Oh, well. So, Pauline, I read an amazing article you wrote on storytelling, and I know that plays a big part into branding, especially with luxury brands. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So actually the article that you were referencing was something I wrote very recently for a large business newspaper in India. And the point that I was making is that Indian craftspeople have the skill, the artisanship, the tradition to rival any French or Italian house, particularly in certain segments like high jewelry. But what the Indian artisans do not have, which the French in particular have mastered, is the ability to tell their story and to create these sets of associations that go well beyond their product line, right? So when you think of brand France, and even the halo that set in the Paris Olympics, it's quite different than what we saw in the Brazil Olympics or in Beijing and so forth. So they've really, the French have really done a great job at even taking Italian brands or Swiss brands, because half of the ones in LVMH are not even French, but they are able to apply that mystique, that richness, that kind of way of expressing a heritage in a way that the Indians have never done for anything outside of their own market. So you probably cannot think of an aspirational Indian brand, which has nothing to do with their ability as makers. And more as they are a consumer market, because it's a very fast-growing, high net worth market as well now. It's the fastest growing luxury market, consumption market in the world at the moment. They are still avaricious for European products, not for their own. So the question about what is a story, how do the French do this so well?
Yeah.
And the Americans do it well when it comes to technology and entertainment, not so much when it comes to product or high-end product. So number one, it's about any good story has character, right? The character is usually a founder. Walt Disney was a man, and to this day, even though he's been gone for 70 plus years, he still has that iconic signature, right? That we think of in association with brand Disney. Right? So there's a man, but the man isn't in a vacuum, right? So a lot of the characters that are at the center of this luxury brand of athlete, it's also the people who have shaped that person. It might be the coach, it might be the family, and the sacrifices that they've made and the lessons that they've imparted. So a good story has a lot of characters with usually one narrator or protagonist. And then there's any good story has what we'll call a setting. There's a time and a place, right? The Yankees or Dodgers of the 1940s have a whole set of associations, as do their players, quite different than the Miami Heat of the 2000s, right? And so really being plugged into how these characters are shaped by the when and the where. One of the athletes we heard earlier shared that he just got here from South Carolina. Even if that athlete is playing on a West Coast team, South Carolina is part of that story, right? And I'd say the third piece, again, this is sort of classic storytelling, architecture, is that there's what some people would call tensions or inflection points, right? There's, and if anyone saw the ESPN special on Michael Jordan, who I just referenced, it's quite interesting how you see, who he was before he became the man that we now know. If anyone read the book on Agassi, which was very good, by the way, very well written, and very well, I think I think that the depth of self-awareness and of honesty it was quite poignant. But what's interesting there is also the struggle of being the son of a abusive father, and how that shaped both his drive but also his own self-loathing. I mean, this makes him interesting and admirable and courageous. And we don't respond to perfection. We don't want to see, the Kardashians don't make for good story. They make for a good tweet, right? But that's not a luxury brand, and it's not necessarily something that translates, for posterity.
Really, I have to read. I have to find that book. It sounds
It's very
amazing.
good.
Yeah. So for the professional athletes in the room and organizations, what advice do you give them for crafting their own messages that resonate?
Well, the first thing I'll say, there's a reason that we've had a slowdown in the luxury world in the last, I'd say, 2 to 2.5 years. And some of the bigger brands like to point fingers at China. China was part of the Chinese marketplace was certainly part of the run-up, but that's not all. That's just a piece of it. And I think some of it when you actually look at which ones, even in a tough market, which today, we've got a lot of over-distribution, some macroeconomic headwinds, I'd say a gross inflation of pricing, which even super wealthy people are not okay paying 80% more for the same bag today than they were paying 5 years ago, right? There's a lot of issues that are kind of now catching up with the industry. Even then, a brand like Hermes, which in my opinion is still grossly overpriced, or Brunello Cucinelli, very expensive, they are growing strong double digits now, these quarters. And the reason they are is, I would say, twofold. And I would say not the same thing about, look at Michael Kors, it's imploding. Or even within the LVMH, Dior, struggling. And some of the reason that there are certain ones that seem to defy gravity is because they manage their business for the long term, not for the quarters. They've been incredibly disciplined. They have not taken, even though Hermes, I mentioned earlier, extremely expensive, 10 years ago it was extremely expensive. It's not more extremely expensive today than it always was. But what they do, the principles they stand by, and the discipline and really the restraint that they show in how they run this business is what keeps them going very strong. So my advice to athletes is, first of all, treat yourself as if you would, to the extent that, and maybe this is a very privileged position, but if you still wanted to feel relevant in 50 years from now, or you wanted your grandchildren, after you were gone, to still have pride in what your name stood for, because you would make very different decisions about who you would align with, about how you would present yourself, about how you would also charge out your brand equity. And I think the temptation, and I understand it, I'm a business person as well, but the temptation, it's easy money. All I have to do is appear in the ad, or go give that one talk, or wear something in a tweet or a post. It's awfully tempting. But the cumulative effect of that is a loss of credibility and a sort of short-termism that that the minute that your particular sport or your ability to play at the highest level at that sport goes away, you've lost equity, you've lost value. And there are some, both celebrities and athletes who are are really good chess players. Vast majority are being exploited and commercial and probably are not going to have a very long tail.
Oh, that's really good advice. Well, this has been amazing having you with us today, and thank you for all your great insights. And if a brand wanted to get in touch with you about your consultancy, how would they contact you?
I don't know if this is good or bad in light of the security conversation we just heard, but nowadays, anyone you want to reach, you can find them. Yes, I am on social media. I don't shoot the inside of my apartment, but I take great comfort in having a doorman, so don't even try. No. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me. I have a website, aestheticintelligence.com.
Great.
Thank you.
And my book site is achievingtheholygrailofmarketing.com or holygrailofmarketing.com. And this has just been a wonderful session, and to be amongst such incredible speakers. I know everyone's hungry, so let's have lunch.